And welcome back to AR Sales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am Annabelle, and today I am joined by Kayla Jordan, Wattpad author of Chasing Charming. I was about to mess it up. I don't know why. I was thinking Chasing Shadows. I don't even know if that's a title. Kayla, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great. Now, where can people find you for the people listening on Instagram, website? I know you have a link tree.
Yeah, I'm at Reader's Aesthetic, is my Instagram, spelt the way it's supposed to be spelt, which is nice. And also Bear Jordan on Wattpad. And then one of my Wattpad works, Shift, is also published on Amazon. And that's the edited version of that. The unedited version on Wattpad, I wrote when I was 16. So you could also read that.
Oh man, just the editing process. I'm going through it right now. We can definitely jive on that in a minute. But I usually like to start off on what it is that got you into writing. What was the very first thing that kind of opened your mind to what literature was?
When I was in second grade, I started writing these little stories that I would kind of make like comic books, and I would pass them out to my classmates. And there were two that my teacher ended up phoning my mom and being like, "Your kid is super weird." Because I wrote one called The Bossy Belle, and then the second one was What is a Yam? And that was me trying to discover what a yam was because I'd never heard of it before. I settled on a prehistoric bee. So that's sort of what got me into like just creating stories. And my friends have always said I like to spin a story for sure. So there's that. And then when I was in high school, when I was in elementary school, I discovered Wattpad, which I was far too young to be on that website. But by the time I was in high school, I started writing on Wattpad. Terrible stories. They're gone now, but I quite enjoyed it. It was better than writing essays.
Wow, I didn't even know Wattpad existed back then. If you ask me, it came out 8 months ago.
Yeah, it came out, I think, in like 2006. I was 8 when it came out, and I found it
Wow.
right when it came out. It was this site where you couldn't post a story by chapters. You had to post each chapter as a separate story. And there was no saving the stories. You just had to search them each time. It was terrible, but I was obsessed with it. And
That's how Reddit is right now.
yeah.
Yeah. Now what color is a yam? Is it yellow and black, or is it bigger than a regular bee?
Yeah, it was in my mind, like my mom fed me a yam and I didn't know what it was. I didn't realize I was eating like a starch. Like I was like, what is this? It can't be a vegetable. So I thought I was eating meat. I was a very stupid kid. I just so I knew what a yam was. I'd eaten one before, but I didn't know that it was a vegetable.
Man, that's awesome. I used to do the same thing when I was a kid. I used to make comic books of just, classmates and just environments and things like that. I had a teacher named Mr. Olson, and I made him as a character, Mr. Omegalode, and like with like a
Oh,
huge mouth because he was always yelling at me because I was always being a smartass. Well, not
love that.
really. I more of a dumbass. I was just like the slapstick humor, you know what I mean? I was like doing Chevy Chase shit. Um
Love it.
Now, where did this like love of the Wattpad genre? Because for the most part, Wattpad has it always been leaned towards the romance side?
Yeah, so both my parents are teachers, so I was allowed to read whatever I wanted, watch whatever I wanted growing up, as long as I would talk to them about it. So I was digesting
Hmm.
um, books that are probably not meant for that age group at a much too young age. So I got really into horror and romance when I was like 7. I was reading like Stephen King. I read Flowers in the Attic. Far too young. I didn't know what anything meant, but I was loving it.
7.
And I was also watching like horror movies that young too. I was super into it. So finding Wattpad was because I was searching up vampire stories, because this was before Twilight came out, and I was like obsessed with still like, the I think the Vampire Diaries came out in the 90s, so I was reading that when I was young and all that kind of stuff. So searching up vampire stories, that was basically the only thing on Wattpad when it first started, was just a slew of homemade vampire stories, because it was sort of that start of the vampire era.
Hmm.
and that sort of then got Twilight going. But it started with Vampire Diaries and Blue Bloods, and then it kept going from there. So that's how I found it. And it was basically all the stories were titled things like I kidnapped a vampire and just terrible stories like that. But that's sort of what I focused on. And that's what, when I started writing Shift when I was 16, that was what I was still focused on.
So walk me down that process. How did you go into creating, how do you go from basically absorbing content to deciding, all right, I'm going to create it one day?
Well, with the vampire stuff, my main issue with all of the vampire novels that were out is that most of the males were abusive.
Mm.
And I didn't like that. I like the type of romance novel where, like, people have flaws, but nobody is actually abusive. And if they are, they're being like mind controlled or something. Think like Bucky from, like, Marvel. So I decided that because I couldn't find any of that, I would just write it myself.
Man, yeah, that's awesome. It's like such a common thread that it seems like where most of the writing comes from is just the love of reading. I know it seems like so obvious, but it's unreal that for all the different stories that you hear, that is the true honest through line of almost every author, every writer that I've come to, even if it's poetry, novelizations, or anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, every kid that I know that has either become a writer, is in school for writing, it's because they were the kid who was in the library at recess. This is just consuming content.
Were you that kid?
No, I was outside. I was outside, like I was the one in charge of like grounders or tag. Or
Yeah.
I couldn't sacrifice the outside time. I just didn't sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, I read a lot as a kid, but I really couldn't tell you what I read. Like, I mean, Percy Jackson, I feel
Yeah.
like was the first time that I woke up literally, like not literally, but literature wise. It was definitely the first time that I picked up a book and like read text and was like, wow, it really blew me away. Second time was honestly Romeo and Juliet when we read it in high school. And it's actually why I want to talk about the whole thing with romance, because that is such an interesting story. When you read Romeo and Juliet when you're 16, you believe it. You're like, yeah, that's how love is. It's that fantastical and whimsical. And like you would go to that length in order to prove yourself at XYZ. And then you read it just 3-4 years later, maybe you go through your own heartbreak, XYZ. And you're like, yeah, this is insane. Wait a minute. You are drinking poison over a 2-week fling.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's really like, you watch it with Disney movies too, like every
Yeah.
single princess that falls in love with the prince, like especially Little Mermaid is one that comes to mind, where it's like,
My
what do you
entire
think?
life.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, but when you're 16 you think that way.
Yeah.
Everything is like, I always say, like, until you're 18 you have absolutely no concept of long-term um anything. Like nothing, that everything that is happening right then and there is the most important thing. And that's why 16-year-olds can drink poison for a 2-week relationship.
Now, going on that note, what do you think is the height of romance? Like, what do you think is the best written or TV show or movie? What is the best relationship or even just love in general? I guess it could be between a person and a dog, Shout out to Will Smith and I Am Legend.
Oh, that's
um,
hard because there's of course some of my favorites. Like I'm obsessed with like Iron Man and Pepper. Like I just love that so much. Um but then you go to like, yeah, and then there's like all this other stuff like Bridgerton. I loved that TV show and those books that just came out. Just something that like you love so much when you're reading it. But like the height of romance would definitely be something like, okay, have you ever seen Parks and Rec?
yeah.
Ben and
April and
Leslie.
Andy. Oh, okay.
Ben and Leslie. Because they just, the height of romance for me is two people who just love each other so much that they put the other person ahead of them and all their needs and wants, but they're focused, but that other person's doing that for them too. So it's like that perfect balance. And they're so respectful and kind. Andy and April are pretty good too. If we're going there too, like they're pretty respectful and loving towards each other. That, and even then Leslie and like her best friend, like they have
And
such
right.
amazing love as well. Like that show shows such healthy relationships. And I think that's where like the height of romance doesn't always have to be this like, we're throwing each other down, throwing our lives down, sacrificing ourselves. It should be like healthy things. And I feel like not enough literature, not enough, TV movies have that and showcase it in a way that still makes it interesting.
I mean, well said. Just it really is the, and I'm not gonna say that I don't like romance movies. I mean, I like watching. I mean, I can't say I've really sat down and, like, read anything like what Nicholas Sparks. That's like the guy that
Yeah,
does all the.
he does some weird stuff.
Yeah, I'm
Wait,
not reading any. Yeah, I'm not doing any of that. But I've sat down and watched a couple of romance movies and I've enjoyed it. But to me, the true romance are like you ever seen Maniac, the Netflix little miniseries with Jonah Hill and
not yet.
so that's a weird one because it's not like a sexual relationship at all. It really is just like friends, but it's the exact type of situation that you talk about is where it's just like complete delusion of the self in
Yeah.
order for like a respect of another person. You know what I mean? And you make a great point with like bringing in Marvel, because Marvel really nails it on the head. You have Tony and Pepper, but then you have Steve and Peggy, and like that
Yeah.
whole thing, and you only see and you only see a glimpse of it at the end of the movie, but it's enough. It's like the whole like Hemingway iceberg thing. Like they given you enough so that when you see a little bit of it, you get a whole bunch of emotions that aren't even necessarily on the screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that one's a good one, Cap and Peggy, because they're,
Mm.
I mean, I know a lot of people didn't like the end of their story, because of the whole Stucky thing, Bucky and Steve, but I liked it. I thought it was, because in that first Captain America movie, the respect that Steve had for her was like, I was like, oh, this is great.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, and not only that, I mean, actually, you kind of hit it on the head there. It really is the respect that he has for her. But when I just recently went back and watched that movie, because of like the whole Disney Plus Falcon and the Winter
Yeah.
Soldier, I went back and watched that, and it made me it reminded me how like of a noble character Steve Rogers is. And I know it seems like obvious, but like I guess you kind of forget it because like he becomes friends with Tony Stark. He starts swearing a little bit, gets a little cooler and whatnot, which is awesome character
Yeah.
development. But you really forget how much of a literal little guy he was, and how he still would act the same way as if he did with the serum, which was like that whole thing about the emotions and the whole growth of that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Now, if you were to have the helm of that movie, how would you rewrite that as a romance?
Could rewrite that as a romance. That would be, like it does so like my sister and I actually recently rewatched all the Marvel movies and rated them on most romantic to least romantic.
I want to
And
hear
the
that.
funny thing is that hit the top 3 of most romantic, because like really there's not too much romance in a lot of those movies, but that story, despite it being the origin story of Cap, it really is a romance story, because like it starts off with him like no girls gonna want to dance with a guy who they're gonna step on, but
Mm-hmm.
she still respected him throughout that. She still trusted him and thought he was a good person, and then yeah, he turns into this super hot guy, but it wasn't because of that she like fell for him. It was because he was a good person. So like it truly is a romance. Of course, if you were going to add a little bit in, like a little bit more in there, you'd probably remove some of the Hydra stuff and add some more scenes with just them doing
Yeah.
some like, you might remove some of the fighting scenes with Red Skull or something like that. But it truly is a romance movie. It's sort of like how Deadpool sort of said like, oh yeah, this is a romance. Like it kind of is. When the main focus of the movie is actually on the romantic, like the character development and their romance, technically it qualifies.
Now, this might seem like a tangent, but just hold on for a second.
Yeah.
What genre would you put Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Like, what would you call that movie? What would you say that movie's about?
I know it's supposed to be a coming of age movie. Okay, know that. I know that it's what it's classified as. But like, oh, that's it's almost like it's like obviously I love Sloane and Ferris together, but it's almost more about his friend.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly the point. It's like I think the idea of genres and all that are such like an interesting thing, especially with Wattpad and just the all the authors that are coming out on Amazon, that people focus so heavily on genres and everything, but in reality, it is the plaything of the author, of the person that writes it. Because you take a movie like Ferris Bueller and you can easily say that, and it is hilarious. There's a whole bunch of different elements to it, but you boil it down, and it really is just him trying to like get his friend to like not be so down on himself. The entire
Yeah.
movie, like he takes a day off in order to help his friend out, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's about his friend almost coming out of his shell and being like, I'm gonna stand up to my dad. Like that's sort of like the peak of the movie is when he
Yeah.
drives the car off the cliff.
Oh my god. And just a tangent because I have such an associative memory, but I will always forever like love the whole interaction between him and his sister too, because I think it's also, side note, a story of him and his sister too, of like her getting over herself. Like I think what it is like, even because Charlie Sheen even shows up in like the end of the movie as like her
Yeah.
thing, and he even says it himself. It's like, yeah, you don't have a problem with him, you have a problem with yourself, and you're like projecting it onto him. You need to like get over whatever is bogging you down. And
Don't worry
like,
about what he's doing. Focus
yeah,
more on yourself and we can have this great time together. It's yeah.
yeah, and like just the beginning of that, when she's so like hateful of everything, and people are like collecting money because Ferris is sick, and she like just like throws the bin, and he goes like, all right, what are you gonna do when you need help from Ferris and he's not there? And he starts like running away like he's like a cult leader. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that entire movie is just built in a different way.
Yeah.
Now,
It's so good.
segueing into that, how do you feel about world building within a romance? Do you think world building takes away from a romance? Do you think it adds? Well, I guess it's all depending on the writer, but from your experience, especially that you rated the Marvel by most and least romantic.
Yeah, it depends on the book. And that's sort of just what you got to boil down to because Sarah J. Maas does a fantastic job of world building while creating one of the most popular romances of right now. Because it truly is about, her main character and then the different romances that she gets to be in, because like there's more than one. But her world building is fantastic at the same time. Like she does such an amazing job of making you want to be in that place. But if you know, if you, because I'm going into a master's of publishing, so like that's sort of where a lot of my knowledge of genres and stuff comes from. But if you were to boil down what her book is, it would not be classified as a romance due to the world building. It would be a YA fantasy novel. Because if the how it works in publishing is if there is a romance novel, nothing else that is going on matters except for those two characters, or three, or if it's triangle or something like that. But it will not be classified as a romance if the stuff that's happening around those two characters matters more than those two characters' feelings. And in most fantasy novels where world building happens, like my sister's favorite books growing up were The Hunger Games, and she was obsessed with like Peeta and Katniss. Like she was like 9 years old and thought that was the peak of romance. But though that romance did not matter, it did not classify because what was happening around it mattered. So it would never be classified as a romance. Where Twilight, Edward and Bella, that's a romance novel because whatever's happening around them doesn't actually matter. because it's about their projection going forward.
My God, that's so interesting.
Yeah, so it's just how you classify things. So most world building would never be classified as, if there's too much world building, it would not be classified as a romance. That's why most romance novels are very short. They follow just a very short, quick formula, and they go from A to B. Like technically, my book Shift, there's too much world building for it to be a romance, even though you would still sort of be like, okay, well, it's like a romantic vampire story.
Well, walk me through that. How did like the plot, without getting too much into spoilers and whatnot, but how did that come to be? How did you go through the process of creating that story?
So I rewrote it about 3 times throughout high school because, when you first start something, it's just terrible. Um, and then you sort of get to something that actually makes it a story. And I started with the 2 characters, and I started it after watching the first season of Supernatural, actually, when that came out, like when I was like, I don't know. It came out so long ago. It came out when I was like in early high school, and maybe even elementary school. But I started it after seeing a shifter on like about how people could like change into different animals and stuff, and I went, that'd be a cool story. So I started writing about a character who could shift into different creatures after watching, something that it was supposed to be a monster, but making her not a monster. She was the good person. So I always love stories where the monster is not the monster. And so I just started creating her. I didn't want any humans because in my mind, humans are usually the monster. So we just got rid of that.
Okay.
And we started with, this character that in all movies, all things, like this is like an evil thing, and made her good. And then had these terrible things happen to her so that she could then sort of grow into the hero, because I wanted her to be the hero. I didn't. I I I personally would not write a story where the main character doesn't get to be the hero in the end.
Mm.
Just because I think if you're reading a story about, you read Harry Potter, and it would be not as fun if Harry wasn't the hero. You want the character that you love to be the hero in the end. And maybe obviously people need to help along the way, but you don't want that person to just be a damsel in distress the entire time.
I agree with you. And as far as writing wise, I'm right on the same length. But I guess it would be interesting to like maybe like read a short story or like watch like a short film about a person that maybe is a friend to that person, and maybe the whole story isn't about them being in damsel in distress, but more coming to terms that they're not the one. And
You're right. That would be interesting. I feel like TV shows do that pretty well.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
They have like the side character that's, a big focus on a bunch of episodes, but they're not the hero of the story.
Like I just watched the Mitchells versus the Machines. Phenomenal movie. I don't know if you like it.
That one.
It's on Netflix. It's like animation just came out. And they have that thing where like they're like the weird family, and then there's like the Kardashian Twitter family that is just like perfect in every way. And anytime they're in a situation, they just get out perfectly, like spy drones, and the family just does their version of it. I don't know. I think things like that are just like funny because
Sure.
I don't know. I think it leans more to comedy though, I guess, because
Yeah, that's true. When you've got those sort of like the side characters, like we're the Millers, like,
yeah,
kind of like it's just a bunch of goons having a good time.
Now, what's weird? One of my favorite romance movies, like I don't know if it's number 1, but it's definitely top 3, top 5, is Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
That's a good movie.
Yeah, without a single doubt. And like the reason why is more just when you break it down, and I was thinking about it when you said the whole thing about genre being revolved around like the love thing. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of action sequences and like the comic book like lore of it. But when you boil it down to it, it is just the personal development of Scott. Like the very last boss, he gets the sword of the sword of love or whatever. and like he doesn't beat the boss, and then he redoes it and he gets a sort of self-respect, and then he beats the boss. I mean, like you couldn't get more, like, I don't know. I think that's the perfect message to like send to like definitely 16 and 15-year-olds. When you're on that Romeo and Juliet thinking of love and whatnot, it's just like you need to start at home before you start outsourcing.
Yeah, they do a good job of that with like all those movies that sort of almost make fun also of the manic pixie dream girl, which I think it does a good job because like the main girl in that is a manic pixie dream girl. And but and same with like John not John Green. Is that the one that does the books? One of the Green brothers. He wrote
That
like
sounds
Looking for
familiar.
Alaska and Paper Towns, and it's like making fun of the manic pixie dream girl in the way that the boy, the hero in the end gets to realize like, hey, like none of this was about that. It was about like I just need to like grow up myself and live my own life. And those are always good stories because they're important. And it's sad when people don't get that message from them
Hmm.
and they just see that romance as just like one thing. Because it's like, no, it's about growth. If you don't get it, maybe you need to watch it again and grow a little bit.
Now, did you use those themes of like love and romance and whatnot? Did you incorporate them into Shift? Because you started writing it when you were 16, but you obviously went through the editing process, which is a process. I mean,
It's
it,
a process.
yeah.
Yeah, I started off with a pretty toxic character, like male character for sure when I was 16. And eventually by the last rendition of the novel, he turned into not as toxic of a character. Now it's definitely not anything because I still, the basis of this was still when I was a teenager. And I just published it because I was like, why not? Like, might as well. This will be fun. Just to mostly figure out how the publishing process works since I wanted to go into publishing. Um, but it's not something that if I wrote a book now, the characters would be like because they are definitely more just toxic and the less growth than I would want in a character now, for
If you
sure.
were to if you were to rewrite Shift, if you were to publish Reshift,
Yeah.
what would you do? How would you treat it differently? And what do you take away from that world building aspect? Because I mean, that's my shit. Maybe that's where I deter, but especially all that animal shifting and whatnot, and like the whole, I guess, Frankenstein aspect. It's like, oh, are we really the monsters? I mean,
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's right up my alley.
I would probably actually move more into that. But to add to the romance, I'd probably make it an 18 plus story if I'm being honest. I would just remove
Okay.
that whole, I actually prefer much or like more maybe like 16 plus. Like I would move more into like make it a little bit more adult
Mm.
rather than having it be so, preteen, which is what it sort of is. Just because that's what I enjoy reading and that's now what I enjoy writing. So I would probably just move that. And by making it more adult, the things that they were thinking, I would make them a little bit more adult and their reasoning behind what they're doing would be a little bit more clear.
Hmm.
Because when I first wrote it, I was 16, and the reason of things that I did when I was 16 wasn't always clear. Like you just do things when you're that age because of feelings, not because of any sort of logical thought. So that translated
Hmm.
into my writing. And when I, got a bit older, I can have some logical thought, but behind whatever I'm doing, and that could translate into my writing.
Now, I'm completely naive to the whole, I guess, triple X version of the romance side. I mean, I don't even read regular romance. I have no idea what's going on the other side of the fence. But what is the difference between 16 and 15 and 18 plus? I mean, is that like degree? Is that like hard versus soft porn? Like what does that mean?
Um, Basically, like any adult romance that you find is going to have sex scenes in it. It does not, like, if it is classified as a romance in a store and it is in the adult section, expect that. There is no way that it's not going to have
Like
that.
off the jump?
You like, unfortunately, a lot of the time, yeah, which
Huh.
I'm not that into. Like, I prefer a slow burn type of romance. But
Buy me dinner first, you know?
exactly. But you're gonna find it in every single one. I have
Huh.
yet to read an adult romance that doesn't get to that at some point, unless you read horror adult romance, which I'm much more into. That then you just get murder everywhere, and that's kind of fun as well. But yeah, that's sort of like the 18 plus. If it's adult, there's going to be that. If it's 16 plus, it's going to be like, Sarah J. Maas sort of writes 16 plus, which it can still be classified as YA because it's not everywhere and it's not super graphic, but you're still going to get some graphic scenes for sure. But it's more like,
Hmm.
just sprinkled in. You get it here and you get it there. It's not like that's the purpose of the characters, it just happens. So I prefer more like 16 plus because, you just want a little taste of it everywhere. You don't need it to be like full force. This is the purpose of this book.
So 18 is like bam bam wow wow, like it
Yeah.
needs to start off with a jazz intro when you open up the book.
Yeah, they call it romance, but really like all those movies that you see that are like romance movies, and it's like I don't really watch romance movies either. Like I'm just really not that into it unless it's like has some other purpose. Like I'll read it, but I won't watch it. The romance movies, they take away basically all of that. But if you read the book version of them, like half of it is just that.
Huh. Well,
Yeah.
and I don't know if I can be honest. I think I lean more on the idea that you were kind of hitting on with I think romance just kind of like is underlying a lot of great things. I mean, you have Lilo and Stitch behind you. That is my forever shit.
Little, a little too much of it, but yeah.
And I mean, just growing up with that, I mean, I think that like, I moved around a whole bunch when I was a kid, and just like even then, it was like, oh, like I understand what it is to be like at a new place and be like, oh shit, what am I gonna do around this place? And how you find like comfort in the people that are just like, oh, hey, I'm also pretty weird too, and just like in that whole interaction. I mean, I think I used to watch that movie at least twice a year until I don't know college. I don't know.
Yeah, I watch it a little too much still. I love Lilo and Stitch. It's just the found family trope is one of my favorites for sure.
Talking about tropes, which ones do you like what are some of your favorite tropes? And it doesn't have to be genre specific. I mean, it can just go about anything, even in books or TV, movies.
Hmm. I mean, I do love like found family is probably my favorite. Um, and that can be like romantic or not, but usually not, which is when it's kind of it hits the most. It's just so nice to see.
Like
I
Shameless type of thing.
Yeah, like just sort of, you know, have you seen the Winter Soldier
Yeah,
yet?
yeah,
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 like
definitely.
how Bucky the very last episode, how Bucky finds Sam
Mm,
and that whole family. Like that is sort of like that hits home. That's my absolute favorite and across all genres. When it
yeah.
comes to romance, I definitely like it is a terrible trope, but I definitely like the perfect male trope where it's just like here's this male who has absolutely no flaws. And it's like I love it because it's like, you don't get it. You get more of like the abusive male trope, like the like, bad boy or whatever. I'm not as into
I don't
that.
give a fuck. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not as I like it's like, okay, here's this book where there is a perfect male. Now here's the story. And I'm like, I like this one the best.
Man, I like that a lot because I think now I can't really say that like the world's like this, but I really like to ground a lot of my fiction in reality. I
Yeah.
mean, like look at what Marvel does. They constructed an entire like one of the biggest cinematic universes ever off the idea of grounding in some level of reality.
Yeah.
But I think you speak to a really good point that I mean, we're writing and digesting fiction. We can do why can't things be in this like perfect, nothing's wrong type of idea? And kind of leaning on that, what are your like guilty pleasure TV shows or movies or
Oh God.
you know what
Okay.
I mean?
Yeah.
Like the ones that aren't that highbrow. Oh, this is like a good relationship that I could look forward to, like that shit that's just like, no, yeah, I can't
Okay.
stop watching it.
My absolute favorite TV show is Riverdale. Now, I was actually on like an episode, like because I live in Vancouver, so if you feel like I do background acting, just because it's like super easy to get cast as a, like I'm turned 24 in 2 days, and I look like I'm like 17, so I have the easiest time just being cast as like a high school student in whatever still. So I love Riverdale. It's terrible. It makes no sense. There's Mothman in the next few episodes. It like it's supposed to be like it started, the first season was a murder mystery. Now, when they first created Riverdale, it wasn't actually meant to be more than one season because it was just a filler spot for Netflix.
For Archer, right? Archie,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. So it was supposed to be a filler spot, but it was so popular that they had to continue. And now they have like 3 more seasons that it's so bad, but I love it. And then I also love like, I don't know if you've heard of After and the Kissing Booth.
No.
They are actually Wattpad novels that were turned into like Netflix movies. I think The Kissing Booth
What?
is Netflix, and then After started as a Harry Styles fan fiction, which turned into a book, which turned into like the worst movies I've ever seen. Like I like movies that it's like you sit there at like the theater afterwards and you're like, there wasn't an ending. Like there's no beginning, middle, end. This wasn't a movie. I love that. That is like my absolute favorite thing.
Oh my god.
It's just
I mean, now there was a couple things that like you said that I wanted to get onto. I mean, the acting was actually really awesome because I mean, like the reason for this podcast is I think that everything that a person is into all dials back into reading and writing. It all comes back home, right? So how do you get, how did that come up to be? How did the writing and how does that go? How, do you think having tried it yourself, have you ever done like the method acting versus just like that? Like, how does that even work? I mean, I love movies, so I think about that all the time. It's like, oh, if I want to be the Grinch, could I just be the Grinch for like a year? I could do that.
good. Um, well, I started when I was quite young. I was in musical theater. So I was always into I'm much more into like theater acting than like TV acting, because theater acting is like all out there,
Yeah,
you're interacting with the audience, and it's a show where, you know, TV acting is very like subdued and
yeah, dialed
um,
in.
which is great, and it translates very well on screen. But living in Vancouver, it is the easiest thing in the world to just get into. Like most of my friends have done it at least once or twice. My high school that I went to had, while I was there, filmed Bates Motel, the TV show, every single day. It was terrible. They were always in my way. So I was in that. Uh, it filmed a Zac Efron movie, Charlie St. Cloud. Um, what other ones? Like Freaky Friday 2, the musical. Like it's
What?
just when Supernatural filmed there, Vampire, no, not Vampire Diaries, some other vampire thing filmed there. Twilight filmed there. So like I live in a and then Riverdale, but I like live in a place where every TV show by CW is just filmed there, and then also Warner Brothers, like all the Scooby-Doo movies were filmed in Vancouver. Like we're Coolsville. So
Oh, fuck, I need to go to Vancouver. Man, that's
yeah,
awesome.
we call it like, we're like all like Deadpool, a lot of Marvel stuff films there too. Like obviously Deadpool because Ryan Reynolds lives in Vancouver, so he's like, we're gonna film in Vancouver. Um, but when you have such easy access to it, you just, hey, sign me up. Like I'm in, what is it called? Well, actually, this one is because I read the book. There's a book called There's Someone Inside Your House, and it's just like a teen horror slasher book. Really, really good. I saw on Facebook that it was being turned into a Netflix movie in Vancouver. So I messaged I just have like, there's a bunch of background acting like agents around Vancouver, and I'm just like on somebody's list. So I like emailed them. I'm like, can I be in this? And they're like, yeah, sure. So it's like if you ever see just like your favorite book is being turned into a movie, you're like, I want to be in it. And it's already being
Fuck,
filmed.
that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, it's North Hollywood.
I was about to say that.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome. Like, I mean, when I in YMCA, I did one summer and I never did it again. I did like a showcase of like for theater, and we did like 4 or 5 like segments of a play. So
Yeah.
like I played Danny in Grease, the
Oh,
Lion in the Oz, and not even the Wizard of Oz, but like the Michael Jackson The Oz. We did like the play of that.
nice.
I played a reporter in Chicago. There was so much dancing in that damn thing. But there was a girl that was in it that was like unbelievable. And even then, I mean, just like everything about it was just hilarious. Like I did that only because the girl that played Sandy, this like gorgeous like Haitian chick that had a crush on in Boys and Girls Club, was like doing it, and I was like, I mean, I can try out. And then I didn't get it at first, but the guy that got the part like didn't show up to practice, and he was like, all right, Angel. And I was like,
Nice.
when the pimp walk over, I was like, hey babe, what's up? She was like 2 years ahead of me.
Oh, that's always fun.
um
Theater crushes.
no, yeah, I mean, theater it's one of those things that I kind of regret not doing it in like high school, but like I just didn't know what I was doing in life. You know what I mean? Like even I love the idea that you were talking about, that you knew about your love at second grade, and you
Yeah.
already were kind of dialing it in and kind of going on that route. I mean, probably my junior year of college is when I started piecing it together that I might like writing over most things. You know what I mean?
Yeah. See, but the thing is, despite the fact I like that, I have always had the issue of liking everything. So there is the fact that I needed to try literally everything. Like one of my like and I want to pursue every single thing that I ever sort of been into. One of the things that I was really wanted to do ever since I was 8 was go work at Disney World. So I went and did that for a year. It's just, you gotta go after every little thing, or what's
Is
the
there
point?
one in Canada, or did you like move down?
Florida. Yeah, I moved to Florida first. It's like a college program. So I
Yeah,
went during my second year of university, and you just get to like work there for like 4 months. So it's like things like that. I'm super into sports. So I work for the Vancouver Canucks as well. Like that's
damn.
I'm on the ice team. So those girls that like skate around and throw cannons and store
Yeah.
tea. That's me. So
Oh,
I do stuff like that as well. So despite the fact I've like loved writing since I was little, it's like, you know, gotta try everything.
I lived in Florida. I went to high school in Florida.
Nice.
I mean, just everything was different. I mean, like I played football then, and like didn't know I liked art, so like it was just like one of those like constant struggles of like everyone's around me like, oh yeah, like I'll tell you how, like I don't know how I didn't figure it out earlier. I didn't like watching football with like with like the
Me
guys who were just,
either.
I didn't like it. I would play it fine. Like there was something about it, just like I don't know, aggression, like daddy issues, whatever. I like the actual
Yeah.
physical thing of playing football, but watching it, I was like, I could give a left. I never cared, you know.
Yeah, I get that. My dad, he was drafted into the Canadian Football League. He didn't make it, but he's always been obsessed with football, and he made me play it when I was little. I tried to become the cheerleader after like the second like practice. I wasn't allowed,
The
but
second time you got sacked, get
no,
up.
it was flag football, so we didn't have any of that. But I was also on a team where it was like I was like 6 and there was like 8-year-old boys, so like there was a little bit of a height difference, a running difference, but you figure out what you like when also when you consume it, because I like watching some football, but I really just like the atmosphere of the games. I don't like
Yeah,
watching it on TV because
yeah.
it's like you're just watching the football, and it's like, what's the point? It's so slow.
We can't
Like
put on
baseball,
Netflix or something.
yeah. Like baseball, like I like going to a baseball game sometimes because like the atmosphere is so cool, and like they're throwing fireworks. Like, they're nuts in the States with baseball. So sometimes it's hilarious to go watch a game. But on TV, I cannot stand it. I'm like, this is the worst.
Me and my friends would show up to Fenway only if there was a possibility of a riot. We rarely went to games.
Oh, yeah. Vancouver knows something about riots. Our
um,
hockey riots are terrifying.
I don't know. Maybe there's something about it. I mean, like you know, obviously, like if it's on your street, that's a huge L. But if you're
Yeah,
there, you know what I mean. Uh,
terrible.
I mean that's so weird how everything goes. But what do you think is the future of the writing game? Do you think you're going to continue more on the Wattpad? Do you think that you're going to go more on the publishing route since that's what you want to be doing professionally?
I'll definitely, if I do have a few stories that like I want to write, but currently I'm working like a 9 to 5 job. But I'm taking a month off in August before I go back to school for my master's, and I'm hoping to just write because I can't go anywhere. I'm in Canada. Nobody's vaccinated. It's terrible here. So I'm stuck at home. Hopefully we'll be vaccinated by August. They say the end of May, but who knows. Um, but I'll just write and then we'll see what comes out. I figure once I get back into school, it will be easier to write. That's what I found. Like once I left my undergrad and graduated from that, working full time makes it impossible to write, especially when I'm sitting in front of a computer all day. I can't do it afterwards. I can write on the weekends.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like I'm just exhausted from sitting in front of a screen. So then I just end up reading, which is great. I've read so much in the past year. I usually read like, a book or two a week on a slow week. So that's great. But yeah, I'm hoping once I get back in school and it's more about studying, I'll be able to sit in front of a computer and actually write again. And then I'll publish. I don't think I'll post anything more on. I get messages every single day on Wattpad about when's shift 2 coming out, because yeah, it does end on a cliffhanger. Did I ever intend on writing the second book? No. I don't think anybody, but it has like, I think it has over 800,000 views on Wattpad. So unfortunately, that's a lot of people who message me being like, when's the next one? I'm like, oh no, I don't know. So maybe I'll write that in August. We'll see.
No, I definitely have to agree with you. I mean, the whole idea, I mean, like a 40-hour a week work cycle schedule, it takes bundles, tons of energy out of like you're like I can't. When I was doing that, and unfortunately, I just went fully on the whole like company side and just like this is what I do now.
Nice.
But prior to that, my God, I felt like I couldn't do anything, even with like the most like motivation that you would try. You would come home, I was like, all right, I'm gonna come home at 5, I'm gonna eat, gonna go to the gym. We're done by 7:30. 7:30 to this time, we're doing this. The moment 7:30 rolls in, you want to watch Netflix for half hour. So then you're doing that mental gymnastics. You're like, all right, I'll watch half an episode XYZ. You get to half the episode, all right, might as well watch the full episode. We're not animals. Then that episode is great. So you watch the second one. And then you go to sleep like at midnight.
I really feel like that's my life.
That's my life. That was my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
I just gave you a schedule.
You
Like,
did.
and then you wake up feeling like shit because you didn't do anything the day prior, and you have like all this like extra motivation of like, nah, today's the day, and then you actually do it that day, and then the day that follows, you do not have to follow through to continue, and then it's just a cycle.
It's just a cycle of that. And like you get some done, but it's never enough to like, it's just never enough because you're never actually going to write the full story when you're doing it like that. You're never going to get through that whole process. So yeah, eventually, once I go back to school, I hope that I'll find something a little bit more fulfilling with work afterwards, and it might be half-time publishing, half-time writing, and see what I can publish myself. Um, but that's for the future to decide. Or maybe I'll go get my doctorate and become a professor. That's also an option.
Huh. Future decide. Like, how does the publishing go into all this? Like, what is the publishing side for you? What do you want to do
I
with it?
what I love just as much as writing is finding other people who are writing really cool things and want to share that because there's a lot of popular works where either the author is problematic, see like J.K. Rowling, or the work itself is like, you know, it's kind of terrible, see like 50 Shades of Grey, where there's a lot of problematic things where communities have to come out and speak about that, being like, no, this, nobody should be reading this.
Or Frank
And
Miller?
yeah, so it's just like, I want to find things where it's diverse. It's, speaking to different people who haven't got to hear themselves before. That's super important. Um, lots of there's so many stories about, you know, I can find the rest of my life I could just read stories where it is a young blonde girl. I could if I wanted to. I could literally just read that, but that's not as interesting. People need to like get good diverse works and having and being able to like I can't really write that as well as somebody who's not a blonde white girl. So I would love to find people and help them publish their stories and stories that they can genuinely showcase in a proper way. Like I could write diverse characters and I do try to put diverse characters throughout my book, but the main character is probably going to be somebody who looks like me or somebody who looks like my boyfriend. So it's just like, you know, publishing would take that other part.
Yeah, I mean, like I think you were like touched like on an interesting point of the industry as a whole, more and more and more. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. And I think it speaks to kind of like a larger human condition where I mean, human is human. Doesn't really matter like the skin tone or whatever it is that you're doing, genitalia, whatever you're into. But more and more you see white males writing characters that are LGBTQ, African, like crazy, just like bisexual, trans, all these different things. And it's great for inclusion. I'm all for it, but it's just one
Yeah.
of those things like, I mean, how much can you speak to that experience?
Exactly. It's like you need somebody who, and of course, there are ways to do it. You can have somebody who's an amazing writer write this story and have people that they're consulting with for these characters. And they do
Mm.
do that in some publishing companies. And that's great. That's a way that you can sort of, have both sides. If somebody's just this fantastic writer and they're going to write a good story, but then you need somebody to authenticate these characters. But, you know, you can also find somebody who can write an amazing story who is an authentic person for that character.
Hmm.
And I think that's what we don't have enough of because a lot of uh, problem with the publishing industry is a lot of them are really, you know, prestigious and very snobby about things, and they're snobby about so many different they're snobby about popular works as well. Like anything something gets popular, it's like, oh well, that's not good anymore, it cannot win any awards because people like it too much. There's a whole slew of issues there, but I'm just going to focus on the diversity issue because I can't take all of that on.
And your version of taking it on, what does that translate? Are you going to go into the indie publishing route? Are you going to set up your own publishing house, start vetting authors and going through the whole editing process, or even the editing process? Is that something that you handle on your own, or is that something that you outsource?
My hope is that, like, I've always been a little bit more, I want to find a company that's already there and take their money and do good things with it, because starting from the ground you're never going to be able to do as much good,
Mm.
um, unless you work really hard that I don't want to put the energy into. If I'm being honest, there's too many other things I want to do with my life. So finding a company that already has the money and taking over a position where I get to choose authors and find authors, or maybe look at trends online and find what people are liking and help the people who are finding the authors find people who are writing authentic works. That's like sort of where I would see myself. If I ever did create a version of some sort of publishing thing by myself, it would definitely be more of you can pay for my services and I will help you self-publish and I will help you find like sponsors. Because I think that also self-publishing and online publishing is definitely going to be more of the future than a lot of the publishing houses like to think.
Hmm. And when you mean sponsors, do you mean like sponsors, like paid sponsorship,
Yeah.
or
Like
okay?
hopefully like, if you um do if you can have somebody who has like, I have a communications background, so it's like advertising journalism. That's my undergrad with like a minor in publishing.
Okay.
So, I think that something that we should do more of for people who are self-publishing is find different, maybe like companies or groups. Let's say that there is like a book that showcases somebody going through an LGBT youth going through a mental health crisis. You could have a sponsor which could help sell your books or, do advertising for you for free or pay you to like put it on their website or do some sort of like showcase for you, like a mental health, association or something like that. And that's sort of something that I don't think is being tapped into enough with the self-publishing. And you need somebody to advocate for you, or you could advocate for yourself. But that's something that I think more people could be doing.
I've spoken to a slew of authors, just through the podcast and everything. Only one has had a sponsor for their book. One.
You need to advocate if it's something like for my books that I've written, it's never something that I wanted to like showcase. It's just for fun. But if it's something that I was proud of, you need to advocate for yourself. You need to email companies. You need to find
Hmm.
somebody to do that for you because that's where the money is going to come from, number one. And like, authors still have to think about that. Number two, that's where like more people are going to see your work. And that's important, just as important.
Now, what break down to me what you think the future of publication is going to be when you go and you sit down with your friends from your major and you sit down what the future is going to be about, like, just riffing about it. What do you envision?
Well, my hope is that there will be less gatekeeping within the publishing communities
Hmm.
and gatekeeping from, diverse authors, diverse readers, and different genres because they're very gatekeepy about keeping out sci-fi, keeping out horror, keeping out romance because those types of books skew the sales data. So they keep them out because people who read sci-fi, horror, and romance read at such in like a fast rate compared to any other genres that they have to be kept out of the sales data or it skews the entire thing. In a perfect world for publishing, we could create new systems where that doesn't have to happen. We don't have to gatekeep out different communities because they want their perfect data streams coming in, where it's actually about the content and not about the numbers. And if you focused more on that and focused more on, bringing it into the 21st century with lots of online, Harper Teen has done a great job of this. They have brought so much stuff online. They have focused with a bunch of young people who are doing good work. Um, Things like that. I don't know why that can't be more across the board. It needs to be, for sure.
Especially with the like dissolution of the traditional publishing houses. I mean, it's going from the five to the three, and
Yeah.
then just the growth of Amazon. And even that, I mean, the one thing about it is that the only gatekeeping that we really see now is by on the consumer side, because any person that feels like it can put up on Kindle or even unlimited is crazy. I just got hip to how intense that is. I mean, you can write a full manuscript, not edit it at all, slap a cover on there that you like doodled,
Yeah.
you put on MS Paint, and it is up on Kindle. Like somebody, you'll get paid X amount of cents per page of it being read.
Yeah.
Like that is in like it is insane versus my favorite thing is going on Reddit and reading the rejection letters of like my favorite authors, like Faulkner's rejection letter from like his
Yeah.
publisher. It's like one of those things of like it's exactly what you said with the gatekeeping of before. I can only imagine the amount of great works that were thrown aside because the person that had gotten it that day just had a bad day. They had
Mhm.
a bad argument with their wife. Their coffee spilled over, and they were like, "Ah, fuck everything on my desk." And they literally had like Fight Club and Harry Potter from like I don't know, dog's point of view. Who knows? Just like the best manuscripts ever, and they just in the fire, just just because of the human level, just like not really caring.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, I think that, you know, of course, I don't like works that, I do think that there are some works that could be dangerous. I don't want a bunch of works out there with terrible hate speech or something like that, where it's
Yeah,
not
that's true.
towards a certain purpose, where it's just literally rhetoric for Nazis or something like that. We don't need that out there. But most work, even if somebody doesn't like it, is worthwhile. Like, most people can hate Twilight, sure, but it's worthwhile for it to be out there because there's a bunch of people who like it. Like, I don't
Hmm.
really like, Nicholas Sparks books. I think that they're the same book with the same cover. But lots of people like them, so they're worthwhile. And that's the problem with the publishing industry, exactly what you were saying. One person saying no shouldn't mean no.
Mm.
And I think that having different ways of people publishing, but making it, even though, yes, there is like putting things on Kindle, putting things on, Amazon, it is more accessible nowadays than it ever has been before, but it's still not accessible enough that people who have written something really cool but are not tech savvy can't do it. I know tons of people who are like, come to me and they're like, I haven't been able to figure it out because they just don't understand technology. And
Hmm.
there needs to be more help for those people. Like paid help, maybe, sure, but
But
help.
yeah, we gotta eat, right?
Yeah.
Um, well, that's the whole thing. I guess it's like that you really can't win. It's the whole double-edged blade. I mean, we finally got to the point that there isn't that voice anymore. There's not that person that can tell you no, you can't publish. You can go ahead and do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
But now you have such an oversaturation of the market
Yeah.
that it leans onto what you were saying, that it's not a meritocracy anymore, that it's like the perfect writer and the best writing is going to win the award that year. It's whoever has the best marketing on their side, or whoever has the highest SEO rate, or whatever it is, or whoever has gave the book out to the most beta readers, spent the most money on marketing, a slew of reasons, who knows what.
That's
Or the
100% true. It's like you need to have good marketing, you need to have good social media, and if you don't, nobody's gonna read it.
So what do you think is the future of the writing? Well, I know I kind of already said that, but kind of the writing versus the publication side of things. Like
Like
which
for me, like which one will
Yes.
I want to
Yeah,
go
like
toward?
which one do you think you're gonna lean towards and kind of follow through for the rest of your life? Well, I can't even for the rest of your life is kind of weird. Especially
Yeah,
with our generation. I don't think we have an idea of like, oh, I have to be a mechanic for 50 years. We can switch around whatever the fuck we want. But
yeah, true.
for the most part, what do you think is in just like the pipeline that you can see? What would
Well,
you like to do?
ideally, I would like a little farmhouse where I can write all day. But
Farmhouse, really?
logically, oh yeah, I
I'm
want
more
like
lake house.
goats around me, some chickens. I
I
just
would
think
like a
it's
goat.
hilarious. Something that's screaming in the background. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious for 2 days.
Yeah. I've worked on a few farms. They're fun. Um, but
Worked and you went back home.
no, like in like Vancouver, we have like fairs. So I always like during fair season, like I'll work like in the farm. Be paid to do that and teach kids about farming.
Well, see, I live in cities. I don't none of this shit. Then again, Vancouver's a city. What am I talking about? Damn, need to get
Van-
out more.
Vancouver's weird. We're like you have everything in here. But no, like that'd be ideal. But logically, with the housing market and the fact I still live in my parents' basement, um, it would definitely be more of probably gonna go get my master's for publishing and then try to work part-time for a publishing company and then write one day, so say like 3 days a week at a publishing company, 1 day a week writing, and then I'll have like a part-time afternoon job just because I can't do one job. Like I've never been able to do it. I have to have at least two because I just there's too many things that I want to do. I'll
Mm.
probably maybe I'll still work for the Canucks until I like get pregnant or fat or something and they kick me out. I don't know. Until I'm too slow to like skate. But yeah, that's probably what I'm gonna like hope to do. I do not want to work after this. I do not want to work like one full-time job. I'll work more hours in the week, but it has to be at like different times. I hate 9 to 5. I want like 9 to 5, like 11 to 3. Like I hate schedules.
I am so on the same page with you. I mean, I went to sleep today at I think 7:30 because I went through an editing phase that like went from I think I started at like I think midnight. So I went from midnight to 7:30 this morning, napped, woke up, dogs were in a bundle of mess, had to go and cut their hair and get all that stuff, and then like get ready for the podcast and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because of course it's always something. But then right after this, the idea is probably chill out for like half hour 45 and then get cranking right back on it until I don't know, until I start like getting really annoyed. But for the most part,
Yeah.
that takes hours. But I mean, not honestly, it'll happen 15 minutes. The moment that Word does that one little like double enter or something like that, I'll be like, I'm done. Why even work?
Yeah, I feel
Why
that.
even do this?
I really feel that.
You know, it's the one that breaks my heart when let's say that you're editing and you're on chapter 9, and then for whatever reason you're like, oh, let me just give a quick pass through, and you find an error on chapter 3, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought we did this already. I thought you were all in a row. I thought we were all cool. We were all on the same page. What are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
doing to me?
And then you just go back to the beginning and you're like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like start from here
Yep.
and we'll see. And then you end up changing like 3 different things, which
Yep.
then makes you have to change like everything. The best advice I had ever gotten, and it's the way that I wrote the Chasing Charming book in just a month, just to like write something,
How many words?
was basically just write the entire thing without going back over anything. Don't look back, just write. And that's how I did it. I got an entire story. It is the most basic, like I started with a basic plot and I just went with that basic plot. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna like power through this. I did it and then I went back and edited it and I'm like, I'm just gonna post this on Wattpad because like what else am I gonna do with it? I'm never gonna touch it again. Just as a writing exercise. And it is the first time that I ever cranked out a book that quickly. And of course, if I went back over it and edited it, and like obviously if I had less of a basic plot, because it was just a writing exercise, it could have turned into something, but I would have had all of the basic chapters there. And I think that's the way that I'm gonna try to write in the future, because it worked for me.
I like doing everything kind of like I have a background in engineering, so I just like schedules, putting everything mathematically XYZ, right? So like that's basically how I do it. I just full through and then editing phase 1, then editing phase 2, which is why things like finding an error in chapter 3 when you're on 8, it's like it's like putting water, it's like putting sugar in an engine. It's like, oh no, what? No.
Yeah.
My entire understanding of this existence is that we were already cleared up to this point, and now I have to go back and fully walk through it. And that's exactly what you said, because of course, just within time, the reason I love writing so much is that you get better with it, no matter even if you're trying hard about it. It's just an innate, it's just an innate theme of being a writer, right? It's just an innate thing that happens as you continue going. I don't know why I'm stretching the point so much about it, but by the time that you go back to chapter 2, chapter 3, when you're on chapter 10, you're at least 4% better. So now you go back and now you get to you have to look at that as like a 4% better author, and you have to rewrite that, and it's a ricochet all throughout for the rest of the manuscript, and you just go on cyclical fucking oh my god, the editing is probably I probably gained at least 20, 50, 80 strands of gray hair. Probably lost at least, I don't know, 3 years off the back end of my life. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of stress. I mean, I love writing, but there's something about editing that it is soul sucking.
I get that. I mean, I like editing. Like, one of my favorite things to do is actually edit, because that's where the publishing comes in. But editing your own work, that's when it sucks the soul out.
Mm,
Editing
yeah,
other
that is a
people's
good
work,
point.
I love it. That's great. I can edit anybody else's work because I can criticize. But criticizing yourself and going back, you're either too hard on yourself or not hard enough.
You know what always kills me the most is like the technical things when you write like a scene. It's like, all right, how do I write this? This is a simple dialogue. She said, they said, action, and then followed by another like a little paragraph of monologue or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what, you know, how do you write a scene that is like the person remembering something that happened in the past, but like they're kind of comparing it to something happening at that time. So like how do you, I think that's the thing that trips me up the most is like how do you go in between those tenses without like with still staying on the same thing and just like all the punctuation and
Yeah.
oh, punctuation is the biggest like
It'll be the downfall of me.
it is
Punctuation.
my death.
Yeah,
I
the
already saw
tenses
it.
is just the tenses kill me. I'm consistently, when I write a first draft, everything is switched between like tenses, and it is terrible.
Yep,
And I
me
go
too.
back and I'm like, how did I do this? Like, what was I thinking? What came out of my brain?
It is so weird. That's kind of like the idea of like thinking versus articulation. And on top of that, if I can be honest, it's like even the idea of like me hating editing is weird because I can tell you how much I hate it day in and day out. And the moment I actually start doing it, I mean, there's a reason I can do it for 7 hours. And yeah, I hate a 9 to 5. Uh, because there's like something there about it that it's like you can't tell me you don't get crazy butterflies when you're right before you're about to do some type of recording, some type of acting audition. Or I think an audition probably is probably the most soul sucking because you have to, it's not even the idea of money. It's just like
Yeah.
you're going for the possibility of money and you have to go and perform in front of a group of 5 adults who are just like looking at you and just how the industry is. I'm sure like you'll catch one person that's like really snotty. It's like, listen, I worked with RDJ's grandmother before, okay?
Yeah.
I don't have to deal with your little bullshit. It's like, all right, guy, I got it. So I don't know. Like I hate public presentation when I'm thinking it, but then when I'm like on the stage and just like talking, it's just like I don't know. It just seems like you're talking.
It becomes natural, and the
Yeah.
more you do it, it becomes more natural. And even if you still, famous actors still get butterflies when they're going to Comic-Con even, and that should be the easiest thing in the world if you think about it, but then they're there and they love it, and it's just, I mean, it's like getting butterflies before the gold medal game. Like, you love it, you love it when you're out there, you live to play that sport, but you're still you don't want to do it in that moment because you feel sick to your stomach.
Without a doubt. I mean, I think it's the one of the things that I've had to mature from like the most in life is that like your emotions kind of mess with you, right? You get like you like if you really think about it, and I can't really say like you would like it happened to like everybody, but in my life, every time that I was scared of something, it was always the best shit ever. You
Yeah.
know, you lose your virginity, you're losing your mind. You're like pulling your hair out. It's like, oh, dude, what if XYZ and all this happens? And then it happens. And you're like, oh, dude, this is the best thing ever. What are we talking about?
Yeah.
Or like you're about to when you walk the stage in graduation in high school, and like for what everyone is thinking it's like, oh, the gown is gonna get caught in my shoe. I'm a hit, especially with the internet age. It's like, oh, I'm gonna be a meme.
Yeah.
Before I even get my degree, I'm gonna be a meme. Um, and everything ricochets like that, but it's Bill Burr actually used like a great analogy that like we build up so much of things in our head just because of like past relationships, relationships with your parents, XYZ, things that you went through when you were a kid, that you think of everything in life as like climbing a mountain, but in reality it's just like stepping on a curb. It's just like the easiest thing. It's just right there, and it's just like you just build everything up in your head, but it's just It's just psychosis.
That's very true. It's, and especially when the younger you are, it's like when you're young, you think that everything is the most important thing in the world. When you realize, like, it's just another day and you're gonna forget about it in like in a year, your brain's gonna have forgotten that moment, and it's not gonna be except for that moment when you do embarrass yourself, then you think about it for like 20 years. You're like, why did I do that?
Right when you go to sleep.
Yeah.
Or in the shower. That's what always hits me. Right in the conditioner, you're like, oh, god damn,
you're
of
like,
course.
oh crap.
Yeah.
Why did I say that? That was terrible. Yeah. I feel that.
You gotta start shouting, you got like the crinklies.
Yeah, those little jitters. Like when you
Yeah.
watch like a TV show and somebody does something embarrassing and you like have that secondhand embarrassment.
The cringe.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I get it. I don't know. I get like weird. I get really into TV when I'm like into it. Like when I watch Breaking Bad and like Walter starts like doing some shit, I'm like, okay, Walter. Like I'll do like I'm a weirdo. I just start getting into it so much.
Like, what are you doing?
Okay, Walter. Now, what about Chasing Charming? How did that whole thing go? And do you think what did you try to do differently from Chasing Charming as what you did with the first work?
Well, Chasing Charming, yeah. So it was just, a writing exercise for me because I got, it was in April of last year. So we were thick into quarantine. You couldn't do anything else. Like I wasn't seeing anyone at that point. We were stuck in our house. So I figured, hey, like, I'm still working, but because I had nothing else to do, I'm like, every single night I'm going to write. Like I had a goal for myself of like every single night I'm going to write like 3,000 words. And because I was basically just, anything I thought, I was just writing it out. Like it was just one stream of consciousness almost. It became like the easiest thing in the world to write, just because anything I thought, I just wrote it down. And then I did go over it and took out a lot because there was a lot of crap that didn't make any sense. But it was an easy way to actually get writing again, which was nice to just, because I hadn't been actually writing for about a year at that point because I'd graduated a year before, and I bought that year I bought a pass to like an annual pass to Disneyland and Disney World. So I wasn't doing anything else. I was like working to make some money and then flying down to like Florida or California. But then when that ended due to quarantine, it was like, might as well. And having that, instead of thinking about each chapter really hard before I wrote it, I just wrote. And it was nice. It was a nice thing to do.
I've only done that once. I did it one time with a short story, but for the most part, I mean, I'm looking at a thing about this thick. That's my outline handwritten for half of the next book that I'm writing.
I do tend to do that with things that I actually care about, but when I just want to write, I just write like crappy little stories, and sometimes they end up okay.
Well, do you journal?
No.
Have you ever journaled?
Much. I have. I'm not really that into it. I more make fake trips. So like I will do all the research and find like pictures that I would want to take and restaurants I would want to eat at and what I would want to eat, and I just make fake trips. And it is like the weirdest relaxation thing for me. Eventually I hope to do all those trips, but it's really just a bunch of fake trips. So that's more what I do instead of journal.
It's weird how people, man, I like that you kind of just like admitted to. I mean, I think we all just do those things and just don't like really say it out loud. I for whatever reason, I like put myself into podcasts of people I really like.
Yeah.
Like I'll be like in my car, just like driving. I'm like, yeah. So anyway, Wilbur, it all started when I was a kid,
It's fun. Like, I mean, those are the things, we all do it.
What kills me is that like you have to catch yourself, Like your brain really just does it. It's not even a thing that you start. It's like, oh, I'm gonna do this now. It's almost like a Zen calm. Like it's exactly what you said. It's just like it just like brings you relaxation.
Yeah, it's like a calming exercise. And we all do it. It's like the same way that every single kid, like I feel like every single person has done this who grew up driving places in the car. You hear a song and you sit there staring at the window pretending you're in a music video. And I don't know,
I mean, that's a given.
like I feel like every single kid does that at some point where you're just like, yeah, like I'm listening to Kelly Clarkson right now, but I'm in this music video. And that's just something everyone does. And so everybody sort of has these weird manifestations that they do continuously, but we stop talking about them because it is a little weird.
I would make like everything a car does be like it's part of its personality. So like a car with like a big exhaust that's like a car that has flatulence, or like when a car is like beeping or honking when out like it talking. It's like when I do the same thing with dogs. Like I never understood about people think that dogs barking is like them trying to make noise. I always thought that was like their version of talking.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
it's well, I mean, I guess technically it's not, but it is. I get that.
know what I mean? Like I don't hear I hear hey, what's up? Hey, what are you doing? You
Yeah.
know, like just like that's what I think about my dogs. That's what I hear them say. Although I do think my dog's a little more elevated. I think they have like in their head they have like a monocle and they're like smoking a cigarette with one of those like long Corella Deville sticks with it. Um, maybe that's how I view it. It's weird how reception works. Now, there was something you said in the beginning of the podcast about the whole Disney princess romance thing.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody tapped you on the head and not only gave you production helm rights and whatnot, but like you could also act in the motherfucker. You could be the princess. How
Yeah.
would you rewrite that as a version that is the antithesis of that whole thing? You know,
So
how would
how
you
would,
write the Ariel story that she ends up being like, oh wait a minute, yeah, my family is the shit. Who are you? You know, like what would be your version? How would you rewrite that? What would you do?
I mean, with Ariel, I've always loved, there's been a few people I've seen on YouTube make videos of Ariel becoming basically an environmentalist throughout this because, you know, it's the human world's a mess. They're eating all my fish, and then the oceans are being polluted. I would, and you know,
Okay.
it sort of starts with the fact that the first thing is like all this, you know, she's showing you all her stuff, like this thingamabob, this, you know, but it's just a bunch of junk that people have put in the ocean. Like it's just a bunch of like garbage that's ended up in the ocean in her home, but she's pretending that it's like all these wonderful things, where it's like a broken fork that she's using to brush her hair. So the idea of having, you know, Ariel's story become one of a girl who starts off with this love for the prince and then realizes that they're actually polluting the ocean and her family's in danger, turning it into one of those. And maybe the prince can end up, you know, he's young. He doesn't know any better. Maybe she can teach him. Maybe it can become that kind of love story instead of one where she uses her, doesn't have a voice, and then, you know, her beauty enhances him, whatever. But
Huh.
changing it to that, changing it, having the one thing I love that Marvel does is nowadays each thing sort of has a bigger message
Hmm.
about what's going on in the world. Like, perfect example, like the latest one that came out, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, absolutely fantastic with that message of globalism and racism.
Yeah, that last episode was a powerhouse. My
Oh,
God.
just fantastic. And the idea that you could, I mean, if we look at it, like all of the newer, and I love old Disney princess movies, don't get me wrong, but all the newer Disney princess movies do have to do with that. Like Frozen 2 was about the fact that the you know, Elsa and Anna's family colonized a land and forced them out of their home.
Is
It's
that?
like it, yeah, like the fact that, you know, the other forest, it's because they decided that they were brutes. The people who were there originally were brutes, and so they forced them out of their land. So it's, these stories are becoming to, they're doing better with that, and being able to go back and maybe rewrite one of the old stories to be more like that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you were talking about it, my mind immediately went to it, but I was like, I'll leave that out. I'll leave that for later. Uh, and honestly, the acting part, I'm actually really interested. How would you tackle that as an actress? Like, I don't know. I rarely talk to people that get into acting. Like, I feel like it's so much more like it's so much harder than what people perceive it to be. That you just go and read some lines, just say on a piece of paper. I mean, it's a whole mind game. So, like, how would you? What would that character development as like an actress? What would that be?
Well, personally, I don't think I'd ever be one of the princesses, but that's just because of my acting style. I'm a little bit more um like growing up when I did the like theater acting, I was never like the damsel or the princess. I was always the like goofy sidekick or like the storyteller. So I was usually the storyteller. That was like usually my role where I'd come out and I'd help forward, like move the story along by like telling the next part or doing the next rhyme that would like help move everything along, explain to the audience what they're supposed to already know.
Hmm.
Um, so I would never really see myself in one of those princess roles. However, if I was to say, um, if I got to rewrite The Little Mermaid, I'd probably be Scuttle, who's the seagull, who sort of
Okay.
helps move that story along in his own way, the way that he's helping her throughout, helping her explain, what the dingle hopper is. And it would be one of those roles where like that's sort of the way that I would put myself into that. Now, if I was in an actual movie, my dream role is to be the first girl that gets murdered in a horror movie. I think that would be hilarious. Like that's just something I want to like just have.
That you don't want to go out like that. First girl in a horror movie is always half naked, always
Well,
in a bra. Because it's always
it's
like that.
true, you don't want that
You
part
don't
about
want that one. Yeah, it's
you.
always a girl that's like the slut, right?
Maybe you want the second one. I don't know. There's like a few where like they're just like in a car driving somewhere and then they get like taken out like with the car. I don't know. There's some, yes, there's true. If it's like a slasher, maybe I don't want that. But if it's like Final Destination and they just get like a stick through the head, that'd be hilarious.
I love those movies. I talking about guilty pleasures. I think those might be mine because it's one of those things that you can pick out the plot 4 or 5 minutes in. Nothing.
Yeah,
There's nothing to it, but
there's
you're
nothing.
there.
It's wonderful. I love, yeah. So like that's the type of role that I would want. But yeah, in a princess movie, it would be a storytelling character that got to, you know, help help it move along. I
Yeah.
don't think I could ever picture myself as that main character who's having to realize these things. Just because, yeah, I've just never been cast as that. I kind of was typecast as a young person.
Well, fuck casting. Like you are. I was gonna say Ashley Madison, but that's not it. Who's that person that does all the like the casting that you see in like at the end of everything?
I don't know.
Man, whatever. Like you are the casting director. You
Yeah.
can do that. Now, is it an ability that you would still just rather play the Scuttle character? But if just somebody goes like, oh no, I actually would prefer you to be Ariel, but you could obviously have the choice to be Scuttle. Would you still choose Scuttle?
I probably still choose Scuttle. I typecasted myself. Like it wasn't
Okay.
about other people. Like I could have tried out for the princess in the plays, and they probably would have cast me at least as one of them. But no, I was always like, nah, I want to be the one because here's the thing: the Scuttle type characters always got more lines. They usually
Okay.
didn't have to be anybody's love interest, and they also just got to be funny, and the princess always had to be perfect. She did get some songs, which was always fun, but she didn't really get that many lines. She was in the plays. She is the main character, but she's never the one doing anything interesting.
Hmm.
Now, I guess that sort of goes back to if you could change it so she was doing something interesting, maybe because then Moana, for example, like I would never put myself as Moana because that would
Oh,
just be
why? No, I think
terrible.
that's your
Well, that
shit. What do
would
you
be
mean?
just horrible appropriation of cultures. I could be the
Nah,
white
nah.
Ariel, but let's say there was a character like Moana that moves the
No,
horse.
then somebody will come out and say that you're classifying redheads or some shit like
Yeah, well,
that.
Probably. I'd dye my hair red. It's fine. But
Yeah.
like, let's say like Elsa or Anna, they do move the story forward, which is great. Um, Anna specifically, like she's the main character of those stories. Now, if I could play her, and you know, I probably wouldn't change anything if I'm being honest. They did a fantastic job of those, but
I've never seen those, which is
oh my
weird
god,
because I have like nieces at that age, but I just haven't yet.
oh, they're my dad saw Frozen 1 in theaters 3 times. I mean, he's a
Okay.
weirdo. He's a kindergarten teacher, so, you know, there's that, but he like, they are fantastic movies.
I can only do musicals one time.
The
One
third
viewing is enough.
yeah, the third time he went, was the sing-along version. He liked the music.
I mean, like, I really like, I really am not one to judge. I can do like an exact reenactment of The Grinch. That was like the first movie I watched when I came. Like, I learned English off that movie. I really, really did. Like, that is how integrated to like my life that movie was. Um, no, but I guess to reformat the question, imagine if you had Deadpool rights to Ariel. You are Kayla Reynolds, and you're helming the new Ariel movie. How do you handle it? Like, you get to do the character however you want it, production wise, anything wise. You get to do all those little things. You get to make her funny. She doesn't have to be perfect.
I think what I would do is I would make her her own storytelling character, because that's what I like about the new princesses. There's not somebody else like Scuttle following them along and telling the story for them and just having them act. They're creating their own story. And like that's what I love about Moana. She's creating her own story along the way. Sure, there's these other characters that are sort of helping her, but she's her own guide throughout it. And that's what I would do with a character like Ariel. She would get to um you know, it wouldn't be the Ursula coming, like, just as an example, it wouldn't be like Ursula coming to her and being like, I could do this for you. It could be her being like, you know what? Here's my plan. I'm gonna go to Ursula and convince her to give me legs, but I'm gonna trick her. Something like that. Give them a little bit more um ability to forward along, not just these things happening to them and them reacting.
Give her some like owl frame glasses, a couple tattoos, right?
Yeah.
She becomes like an environmentalist. She's like, nah, that's not how we do things around here. Shows up on the Joe Rogan podcast, talks about her feelings. Man, can you imagine have now imagine like much integration? Because I mean, like I said, who cares about writing? Well, I mean, I care a lot about writing now, but when I was a kid, my biggest dream of life outside of comic books was and not even reading them. I made comic books. Like I thought that was the craziest thing when people started talking about they grew up reading comic books. I was like, dude, where? What library were you getting your shit from? I had like books. What do you mean comic books? Like what? What newsstand did you have? Like what version of New York were you living in? But for me, it was always movies, right? Writing, directing. That's like the height. That's like my dream. I guess we're ending the podcast on like a whole like dream note. So with everything that you've done with your previous works, you have Chasing Shadow, you have Shift. What do you think is your dream narrative? Taking everything that you've learned before, everything that you want to do, because it seems like you have like a really cool like character of idea of what is missing in the industry and kind of what you want to inject in it. So what do you think is the highest of height? As you said, you have a company behind you. You have somebody being like, oh yeah, we'll give you money. You just do whatever the fuck you want. What do you do?
Well, I create different sectors of, instead of just having everything genre based, we have everything sector based. So instead of just having romance, you actually have different sections of like the subgenres, and you have people actually focus on that so that these niches can gain more popularity. Like I know people love to like gatekeep their own niche, but I think my favorite thing is when something that I love becomes super popular because so many other people are enjoying that. And I know that would piss a lot of people off, but I've always been more of like, if something's good, why wouldn't you want to share it?
Yeah.
Having those better abilities of different things to showcase would be having people who are actually trained or know a lot about that area. Having this one encompassing thing doesn't work for anything. It doesn't work for basically it just doesn't work in any sort of industry ever, even though that's what capitalism is. You need to have these subplot genres in different groupings, and then I would write for the horror romance myself. I would be like, yeah, these are going to be all of my terrible horror romance ghost stories. I'm just going to throw them all out there and publish them myself, but everything would have its own little section that would actually get to be showcased.
I know you have one scene that like just like plays in your head that you just like have that you it has no plot around it. You have no story to it, but it's just like one of those things like, no, I would love to see this. What is that scene? Because I have at least like 8 of those.
Oh my God, I have so many of those. Um, well, I would say probably one of mine. Absolutely no, yeah, no, nothing around it is like the idea of a girl, like this is in like everything, but I just want to write this in some scene. You know, everybody around her is gone, dead, out of commission, and she like picks up the sword that like, you know, caused her so much pain. Maybe, you know, it was the one that like killed her parents or something. Like, I love those kind of stories, and just having like everything be hopeless and then they pick up the sword. And what leads me to that, it's like, you know, I love that kind of thing. I love Tony Stark picking up the gauntlet. I love like Neville Longbottom picking up the sword to slice off the head. Like, it's just like that type of scene. I want to write that in something.
God, I love that.
It's
All right,
just
give me one more tied to horror because I feel like you got a good one for horror.
for horror. Okay, for horror, I would love to write something where, I don't know if you've ever heard of like car rally, but basically in where I live, um, high school students, when they're in grade 12, I never did this, but do this thing over a weekend where they have 48 hours to complete a list of things, and they're terrible things. Like,
Yes.
they're terrible things. And the idea of writing a horror story where, you know, everybody who was in a group had been having this fun, and then, you know, they sort of come to the realization, maybe like close to the end, where they're all sort of like standing there in different levels of just duress, and, you know, somebody's dead because they went way too far, and like nobody, you know, they thought it was all in good fun, and then just someone's dead. Like, that would just be such a good horror thing that relates to my area. Nobody's died, but like I feel like that's how far some of these kids take it.
Oh man, that's good.
It would just be like, oh, I could just imagine it, and it's like, you know, you could see how like, how is this going to play out now that, like, you know, the fun's over, but it's not over because the game's not over, but now somebody's dead.
Have you seen The Haunting of Bly Manor and oh man, huh?
Oh, I love that kind
Oh,
of stuff.
loved it.
I love those. I love like the Scream TV show as well.
I tried to
I don't
watch it. I couldn't get
Yeah.
into it.
I'm like, oh.
I died. I mean, died laughing the first episode. There was like that scene that the girl like falls down, right? But like it was like I don't know if it was like the cinematography they chose or if the actress like chose like a weird like route or something. But the way she fell, it looked like a Chevy Chase fall. It was like I'm telling you, it was one of those things that all my friends were like, dude, what is wrong with you? There's like blood literally everywhere, and you're like cackling like a maniac. It's like, nah, but go back. I mean, pretend there wasn't blood there. That's cornstarch. And that's real blood. What's wrong with you?
Oh, yeah, I get that. I get that in so many horror movies where there's just like in the underworld where like the guy in the last movie gets his head chopped off
With the
in
helicopters, right?
no, this one's like the very end where she like just slices his head off with a sword, but and like his head slides off, but while it's sliding, his like he blinks because like I think it was just bad editing, but it's the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's terrible, but
I
it's
have I have the most twisted sense of humor. Have you seen Goodfellas, Paco? Get out of here.
no, I haven't.
Uh My dog decided to barge in. Hey, it was so weird. He had like energy. I was almost scared for a second. Like he came to give me like a tax or something. Came in like the police. I swear to God.
Just vibing.
Yeah. He's a real small guy too. No, but yeah, the haunting of Hill Manor and Blind Manor. I mean, those are just when spoiler alert for anybody, but the end when you find out who the hanging woman is. Oh
Cool.
shit.
It's so
Oh
good.
shit. Yeah. Like I said, I get real loud like depending on that sounded weird for a second, but like I get vocal depending on the TV shows I'm watching. When that happened, I said, "Oh shit!" Like it was like
Yeah.
I was like, what, like 3 o'clock in the morning, you know? It's like, oh my god, I woke everybody up. Um, but yeah, I've loved this podcast. I've loved the recording, and I love the whole thing of like the romance versus horror. Like, which one do you think beats out the other? Where do you lean
Okay.
on more?
Probably horror, which is terrible. But like, I don't know what it is. I think it's the whole vampire thing. When I was too young, I was reading that kind of stuff and thought it was romantic. So like,
Hmm.
you go from that and then I just, I sometimes question, am I like a sociopath? My favorite thing in the world is being in Disney World, but my favorite content is horror. It's just
That's pretty
so
human, honestly.
it's so entertaining. It's just like the most because you just think like this is never going to happen to me. I think that's the other part of it. You feel invincible while you're reading or watching it because you're like, this would never happen to me until like maybe it does. But that's where it's like with like romance, you're like, oh no, a heartbreak. I guess that could happen to me. So it's not as entertaining.
Man, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You know what I think is truly, and we can end the podcast on this note before doing a little outros, is what is the scariest thing that you've ever like went through? Well, I can't say went through like life experience, but like, TV show, movie, book. Like, what is the scariest thing that you've ever experienced? And what I mean by that is obviously, well, I can't say obviously, but I don't mean jump scare.
Yeah.
I mean truly actually rattled you. Like
Like,
I'll start off with mine. Black Mirror, the playtest episode that actually had the same actor that plays John Walker in The Falcon.
yeah.
That was the scariest shit I've ever seen in my entire life because it's grounded in true fear. It's like the fear of like a parent getting a mental illness. I mean, I think like the moment you hit like 25, 26, I think that is one of the most common fears that people have our age and going, it doesn't end,
No.
unfortunately. It's just something you have to like get, you just have to deal with, which I think is the horror of it, is that that fear doesn't go away. You have to like deal with it.
Yeah. No. I think for me, the scariest thing was actually the one that just rattled me was that one by Jordan, what's his last name? He did Get Out, but he wrote the other one called
Jordan Peele, Us.
Jordan Peele. Scariest movie I've ever seen. Like it wasn't,
What part?
oh my God, the fact like when they're in the when all of them are sitting in the living room and there's both families there and it's them and then that just like it gives me chills. And then also like the first time that you go down and it goes down and you see all the people who are connected doing the same thing but living in like filth and eating rabbits and it's like whoo, it's like one of those where like you end up going down the rabbit hole a little bit with like government conspiracy theories after that because you're like shit, like what if they actually did this, and it's like it's not true, but then you just sort of like there are mad scientists out there. What if they try something like that? Because that's like supernatural stuff isn't scary to me at all. Like I just find it funny. I find like the type of like mass serial killer type stuff kind of funny too, like
Hilarious.
Halloween and
Yeah.
like it's just sort of like it's fun. There's there are people out there like that, but it's usually not as like comical and like kind of like slapstick as the way the movies are. But that
Yeah.
one, oh my God, just like very creepy to me, just disturbing.
My God, yeah. I mean, and even just Get Out, the whole idea that like somebody can fuck with your head and put you in your own head, and like,
Yeah.
Oh
He
my
does.
God.
Oh my God, he does horror so well.
Have
He
you
does.
seen the Twilight Zone? Like the that he does?
No, I don't think I've just seen the originals.
He took over the Twilight Zone and he does it now.
Okay. Oh my
I
God,
yeah, I need to watch it, right?
terrifying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like imagine a mind like that dealing with a Twilight Zone type of plots. I mean, oh shit. They must be so good. I just haven't watched it yet.
Oh yeah, no, I should watch that too. I feel like I'd love it, but I'd also be like he has like a mind of a genius because he's so great with comedy and then just like fantastic with horror as well.
Well, I think that's the I think that you kind of like nailed it on. I think we that's why I love that you're talking about everything with the whole genre thing is that we just innately, I guess that's what humans do. It's just like we like to break everything up by like cute little boxes and like little categories and classifications, but in reality it just exists in one thing. If you really look at it, you go back to the Greeks and their face of like the drama, like the like the happy and like sad face. They didn't think of that as two different genres. It wasn't comedy and drama. That was one thing. Life was a comedy and drama. Like if you just looked at it like that, that's what it was. I mean, if you look at certain Key and Peele, like from their like their sitcom, not the sitcom, like their TV show on Comedy Central,
Yeah.
a lot of what their funnier sketches were horror elements if you thought about it. You have like the one guy that's eating at the continental breakfast, which is one of my favorite skits, and he's like geeking out about like all the like nuances and all the like little danishes, and then it ends with like him being like a ghost basically, like he's like reliving that same day over and over again. I mean, if you just depending on how you write that could be the funniest shit ever or the scariest shit ever. It's just depending on how you go about it.
It's just all about tone. You can
It
write the
is.
exact same thing.
No, it really is all about tone. Now, to for all the people listening, and I'm about to share so people can also get the visual aspect. Where can people find you again?
So
Instagram.
yes, on Instagram, Reader's Aesthetic. And then if you go to my link tree, you can find me on Wattpad. Um, and then you can also find me on Amazon with Shift, which is also a part of the link tree. But yeah, Reader's Aesthetic, same. I'm also on TikTok with that. I haven't posted anything. So there's, but maybe I will eventually. Yeah. So that is where you find me.
Your 1200th place in science fiction for Shift.
Nice.
What's weird is that's actually a pretty good ranking.
Like that kind of thing scares me because sometimes I'll get my like notifications that like, you know, I like I'll get those notifications like, yeah, you made this many sales. I'm like, who's reading this? Who how did they find this? Because it's not my friends.
I don't have any of those. No. No, honestly, like it must be imposter syndrome because obviously there's something to be said. Bear Jordan on Wattpad, 293 votes, thousands of reads. Shift
I mean,
has 800,000 views. I mean, that's those numbers are undeniable.
yeah, but definitely imposter syndrome. I never feel like I should be there, but I am. You can find me.
And you are skating yourself to the top. The cheesiest way I can think about it, but I just I kept the moment you said the thing about skating, I was like, damn, I can't skate. Well, I
Yeah.
can, but we all know how it's gonna end in like 10 minutes.
Oh, I'm Canadian. It's the first thing we learn how to do.
Do you ski?
Yeah, I do ski. I'm not the biggest fan though, because I don't like being cold, which is a little bit strange due to the fact that I live in Canada and my
Vancouver
favorite thing to do is skate. So
and skate.
yeah, skiing
Well,
is so cold.
I guess you could also roller skate, but who does that anymore? Unless you're like in Venice in California.
I have roller skates and roller blades. I'm terrible at it, but
Roller, like the ones with the four on each side. Okay.
yeah. My mom got them for me for Christmas one year. She's like, "You've always wanted these." I'm like, "Have I?" But I have them. I have to wear knee pads when I use them. But yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. complete honor to have you. And again, thank you for taking the time out.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Now, any final thoughts for the people? Just final things you want to say?
Well, yeah, if you are out there and you want to write something, just write it. Just publish it yourself. Stop looking at all the no's and just, you can say yes.
Well said. That was Kayla Jordan, aka Mickey Harris, right?
Yeah.
Aka Lilo and Stitch. I'm sure you have 1,000 of other aliases. Bear Jordan on Wattpad. Go and check her out. Pick up Shift on Amazon. It's on Kindle, and is it also on Kindle Unlimited, or is it just ebook version?
I think it's just ebook version, but it might be Kindle Unlimited. I don't know. I'm not American, so I can't even tell.
Well, Shift is also up on Goodreads, right?
Yeah, it's Goodreads, and then you can also get it at Barnes and Noble.
Well, make sure to drop a like, drop a comment, pick it up, do what you got to do, support the author, and specifically everything she's gonna want to be doing in the industry publishing. I'm excited to see how the future is gonna look with her in it. So again, thank you. This is the end of the podcast. A.R.'s Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. I am Annabelle. This was Kayla. Check with us on Friday when we have our new episodes, and as well on Monday when we have our next author cast. Peace out.